Welcome again. I have an exciting couple with us today. Nate and Susan Butler from Albuquerque have a rather unique ministry. You know, we all sometimes get wrapped up in the commonplace ministries. You know, we all have a membership in a church someplace, a local church. Hopefully we all do. There are those of us who don't, but we all have certain kinds of ministries, and if you're a Christian, if you're called of the Lord to minister, God says that you are to minister right where you are. And in so doing, He has placed a ministry right in the laps of these beautiful people that I've just had the privilege of meeting just this morning. The ministry that Nate has touched the lives of millions of children all over the world, and yet doesn't have his name on it, has somebody else's name on it. But you know, today he's here to tell us about an extension of that ministry that does in fact have Christ's name on it and allows the Lord to receive all the glory and praise. Welcome, Nate and Susan Butler. It's good to have both of you here. It really, really is. There's this little magic pen painting book here that gives you a clue that Mary Alice held up in the opening. And it's Jim Henson's Muppets. And Nate, apparently you had a great deal to do with this.
Yes, this is one that I've illustrated for them. And I've done a lot of different work for Henson on the Muppets. This one it's not exactly television type material because it's all in black and white.
Right, but we understand that. That's all right.
It's one that turns to color when kids paint on it with
well,
with
the cover is rather unique because it's showing the infamous Miss Piggy in her exercise outfit. She's lifting a weight in one hand and a huge hamburger in the other, which is pretty much bespeaks Miss Piggy, but that's really cute. That is really cute. Now, the other thing that you can't see on television is down in the corner it says for ages 3 to 33. Now, I would imagine that could almost be 83 too, couldn't it?
That's true, yeah.
Sure it could. How did you get involved in that?
Well, it's been kind of interesting. It's sort of a long story, so I'll try to condense it, but it goes back to before I knew the Lord. I spent a long time away from the Lord, and the first time I came to New Mexico, I was just driving through and I picked up two fellows hitchhiking on the Texas-New Mexico border, and we were all just hippie, atheist, weirdo kind of guys, and you know, we hung out together, came through Albuquerque, and years went by. I got born again, came to know the Lord, met my wife Susan, we got married and settled down, and one night, and I had tried to break into the New York market. I'd been doing work here in Albuquerque for different businesses, and I'd been trying to break into the New York market and couldn't. And one night I couldn't go to sleep, and I'm not the type of person who normally has problems sleeping. I hit the pillow and I'm gone, and I felt like the Lord was telling me to contact these two men that I'd picked up hitchhiking years before, and I thought, well, why would I want to do that? They were both Jewish men, and I thought, well, maybe the Lord wants me to witness to them. So I found them in the Manhattan phone directory. They were still living there, and I got a hold of them, and it turned out in the intervening years, one of these two men had become senior editor of Muppet magazine in New York. So Susan and I were going back for my parents' anniversary, so we went down, and I met with him, and as it turned out, he wasn't able to get me work with Muppet magazine at that time, but I always had wanted to see the comic book companies, and he sent me over for the 5-cent tour of DC Comics, and they got interested in my work, and they asked me to submit some, and one thing led to another. I ended up working on the Heathcliff comic book for Marvel, and then working on Archie and Jughead for...
Well, we've got a Jughead here as well. You can hold that up
yeah, I did the Jughead book for Archie Comics, and then also ended up doing a spin-off book from that called Hot Dog, which was about Jughead's dog. Yeah. And you know, there's just been so many. You want to hold this on? There's been you know, so many things so many doors the Lord opened for me, and when I came out here to New Mexico and to live 15 years ago, I got a job in a printing plant and learned about the commercial end of printing and learned about producing comic books, and then got working for them professionally, all because the Lord was leading me towards one direction.
The Lord had a plan for your life and the gifts that He had given you. but he'd also given some rather unique and special gifts to Susan as well. And Susan has been an integral part in this joint ministry. And you all have started something that's very special, not just for New Mexico, but for the entire country. And that is what? Susan?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Illinois, and I took Nathan, New England city boy, to visit the farm a few years ago, and he fell in love with that area and came home and decided he would create some farm characters. So he created 6 characters called Barnyard Babies, and submitted them to a New York publisher, and they liked the idea and asked us to do 4 books and asked if I could write the 4 books. So I wrote 4 books, and Nate illustrated them using his characters. And it's based on life on my farm, which is on the inside cover of every book. This is a very charming farm. My farm wasn't quite this charming, but this is the house I was reared in, so this is real special for me that Nathan would do this. And
Farmer Edwards' house.
Farmer Edwards' house. That was my maiden name was Edwards, and this is how I grew up with this farm, and so it was very exciting that I got to write the books.
Now, the stories about things that happened to you, actually to your family, while on the farm?
Yes and no. We created a lot of things, but one of the favorite rainy day activities for my brother was to play in the hayloft. So one of the books is about a rainy day, and you spend it inside the barn. And it's all the activities of going up in the loft and playing in the hay and making tunnels and swinging on ropes and sitting on a saddle and pretending you're riding a horse and swinging on gates. And so a lot of the activities are things that my brother and I did when we were growing up on the farm. And so that was really fun to create some of these things.
Well, what kind of storyline do you have in the books, Susan?
Well, we came up with a lot of ideas, but when you work with editors, they have ideas too, and they wanted an alphabet book, an accounting book, and a look and listen book, and this opposites book. So we had to go with what they requested, but we tried to do some real creative, fun things with these. The opposites was, you know, the up and down and the in and out and the warm and cold, and we tried to create that into the play of the Barnyard Babies. And the counting is a garden. We grew up with gardens, and so, you know, it's counting vegetables in the garden. So that was fun. It was the pig's garden, and the letters, I took them on a picnic, and we went out into the picnic where we found the pond, and we found the stream that we had in our farm, and different animals in the woods, and then the opposites were just sounds and sights on the farm. And so it was just creating as many activities from farm life as we could within these realms of the alphabet.
Backstage we talked about the farm itself as it existed when you were a little girl. Does not exist any longer, that it has been purchased and developed, and it, you know, it's just no longer there. But through the magic of illustration, through the wonder that God has blessed you with in gifting you to write the storyline, that farm still lives today.
Right.
And that farm can be a testimony, if you will. It can be a ministry to these little children that we have a responsibility for.
That's right.
That you have actually got a responsibility for in your ministry. Has God really touched your heart in a special way that this is what He wants you to do for some time to come?
I don't know. I would like to do more. We've had teenage children in our home, and I'm working full-time as a director of Christian education in a church, and I do some extra teaching and training, and it takes a lot of discipline and time, and I think I feel called periodically. I say to Nathan, I think I'd like to get back into this, and so I think I feel called to do more. It's just I'm still working on the discipline and the time to do that.
Well, Nathan, you've certainly helped by doing all of the illustration here, but I'm sure you're helping as partners together in this ministry. You're certainly an inspiration for Susan, as she is, I'm sure, an inspiration for you as well.
It was real exciting to work together. Susan, in all areas, of course, of my work, she's always coming up with real good ideas. She's a great source of good ideas for me, and we have just a standing joke anytime we'll be out walking in the morning or something, and she'll suggest an idea, and I'll say, "That's great," and she'll, you know, and I'll incorporate into something. She always says, "That'll be $50, please. Thank you very much." You know, or the kids too. Sometimes the kids will come up with gags that I'll use in Archie or something, and they want to know where their commissions are. But this project in particular was a lot of fun to work on because it was just, you know, it was such a complete joining together of us that she has always wanted to write, and for this, you know, for us to work together on a project like this, it was just a real special. It really ministered to us as a married couple. I've had people say to me, "You worked with your wife on a project and you still like each other," you know. But it really helped us, you know, grow closer together, and it has been a real, I think, a witness to other married couples, friends of ours that you know, are not believers, when we can get together and talk about the books, and you know, sometimes we'll do like little autograph signing parties and stuff like that, and it feels really good to be able to sort of show people that kind of marriage that Susan and I have with the Lord being a...
What kind of development do you hope to achieve for the children, Susan, through this?
Well, I thought farm life was not really great when I was there until you get away and look back, and I'm sorry that my own children didn't have the opportunity to be on a farm. There's a lot of values and a lot of wholesomeness about farm life, and to share that through books was exciting. And my family, you know, they were thrilled and excited and surprised to hear about all of this too. And you know, I just think that it's good literature for children. It's fun. I guess it's fun and it's wholesome, and there's nothing, you know, other than just reading it and having a good time and reading it over and over and over, and learning from it, learning to read and learning about letters and learning about numbers and counting, and I was just hoping to provide something that was wholesome and fun and joyful, and that was my big hope in these books.
What age children are these designed
These
for?
are for preschoolers.
Preschoolers.
Although
or first beginning to learn to read?
Oh yeah, up through kindergarten, although people have said they like the illustrations. Nate being a cartoonist, you know, they're not your typical barnyard animals in looking, you know, and being a cartoonist, we found that older kids like the pictures too. They just think the pictures are great because they look cartoon style.
You know, today there is such a void of good quality, wholesome things for children to really grab a hold of and see wholesomeness rather than all of the lewd things that you see on the bookshelves today in magazine shops and bookstores all over the country.
Science fiction characters and monsters and
That's right.
things of that nature, and I think they all relate to cultism, you know, and to have something like this is just wonderful when you just take the basic farm animals, and that's what life is about.
Well, that's what God created.
To take that. That's
what God created, and I feel a sense of a need to get back to that wholesomeness. You know, I see the families coming together again. I see a desire to want to break the yoke and bondage of sin and all of the cultism things that we're being attacked with daily. All of this, the sexuality that children, I mean little children, see every day in the so-called soap operas. Those things are attacking the family. And it's this kind of wholesomeness that we desire and need in our homes today. Where can people find this?
They're pleasing to us. We have a lot of friends and all who've bought up a lot in Albuquerque. They've been available in different children's stores, and this is a mass market publisher, so it's been in some of the chain stores here in town also.
Chain bookstores and toy stores and
so the publisher is doing the distribution.
Yeah, the publisher does all the distribution for us. And,
so if the local stores may be out, is it possible for them to ask for this by name and at some point expect to have them reordered and in stock again?
I would say, if you know, in some of the local children's book stores, that's possible to do it that way.
Well, why don't we just tell our audience exactly what the names of the books are, okay?
Okay.
And maybe even suggest some of the places where they might go by name.
Okay.
Okay. This the whole series is called Barnyard Babies, and we have the Learning Letters book, and we have the Barnyard Babies Look and Listen. Barnyard Babies Discover Opposites, and the Barnyard Babies Count and Grow. And you can check your Kmart stores or was it Toys R Us, honey? And then some of the different children's bookstores here in town. And I think that there's even a couple of churches, aren't there, hon, that have their bookstores have, does St. Mark's? Still, St. Mark's Episcopal Church has a bookstore where I think these are sold. And
well, that's great. What is this other ministry? This is something called a comic book. Now, is this a Christian comic book?
A Christian comic.
A Christian comic book.
Do they?
What is the name of the book?
Aida-Zee.
Aida-Zee. Aida-Zee. Come in close on that. Just come in and just crop it up real close and tight. There we go. Aida-Zee. Isn't that beautiful? Now, tell us the premise of Aida-Zee.
Well, almost from the day that I was born again, the Lord put the vision in my heart to do this book, to do a Christian comic book that was packaged and produced and promoted in a way that kids who are secular comic book readers, who are reading all the occult and nasty comic books, that they wouldn't just blow it off and say, it's a Christian comic book, that it would look exciting to them, but it would have the gospel message in it. So I've been working on it for about 10 years and, you know, at various stages and trying to get it done. And I used to think that maybe, you know, I was spinning my wheels and that I wasn't getting the job done, but I think it was, the Lord's timing was right. If I had done this book 10 years ago when I was a baby Christian, it would have been a very different book and probably a very wrong sort of book. So after I learned what I think the Lord needed me to know, I got contacted. One of the things the Lord had told me was that I would need to involve people in the industry, people who are just sort of like casting a big name box office movie, that you go out and you get, you know, whoever, John Wayne and Marlon Brando, and you know that you're going to be guaranteed a certain amount of audience because of those names. So I contacted people who had worked on Tarzan and Superman and Buck Rogers and other people who had worked with me at Archie Comics, all of whom were Christians. That was one of the things that, you know, I felt like it was important, at least on this first book, that every single person involved in the production had to be a Christian, right down to the letterers. So every person involved in this book is a Christian, and we put together this first issue, and it's going to function on a number of levels. Of course, you know, the Lord is always thinking so much bigger than us. I was thinking at first we were just going to try to reach these kids that were into comics, that with a comic book that they could read. But since that time, people have mentioned the possibility of prison ministry, of this going into prisons, and there's just a lot of exciting things. I think, yeah, there's a real big market there for it. That
you know, I'm just looking on the back here at these creators. Meet the Aida-Zee creators, and there are names here that most of us probably wouldn't recognize as far as the individuals, but the credits of the works that they've done, I mean, it's a who's who of the comic industry. I mean, it's incredible the kind of people that you have here, and all of these, of course, are Christian. And so their heart was your heart was their heart, and it seems like the Lord has really used these people to allow you to create something that would be wholesome again.
Yeah.
And that would be uplifting and give praise to the Lord rather than to some cult.
Yeah, so many of them, when I contacted them, their first words were, I've always wanted to do this. I've always felt called to do this. But the problem is that it seems like so many artists, myself included sometimes, if you're an artist, it's almost like, you know, the business side of your brain atrophies or something. You know, you can create real good, but you don't know a lot about business. Well, I think the Lord has given me just enough business sense that, you know, because there's times I've wondered, why did the Lord pick me to do this? Because I'm not only one of the physically youngest people working on it, I'm one of the spiritually youngest. I've only been a Christian 10 years. And Gaylord Du Bois, who used to work on the Tarzan comic, has been a Christian, I think, close to 60 or 70 of his 89 or 90 years. So, but I think it was just, there was the right sort of combination of maybe a little bit of the pig-headedness of, I'm one of those type of people that, you know, when somebody gives me an assignment, I'm going to see it through to the end, but also just that having enough business sense to just carry this thing forward and pull it together, and not minding you know, getting in there and having to talk to distributors and having to talk to, you know, the typesetters and just everything that you have to kind of do to pull it together. And as a matter of fact, I ended up not doing really much artwork on the book at all myself, and only a little bit of the writing. I pretty much was editor, art director, and publisher for the book, and turned the tasks over to people I felt were more qualified, or I felt that the Lord in particular had spoken to my heart that he wanted involved.
Well, let me go back to Gaylord Du Bois, because it says here he's a 38-year veteran of the comic field whose scripting credits include Tarzan for 24 years, Roy Rogers for 16 years, Brothers of the Spear, which he created, Space Family Robinson, and many other titles for Dale Goldkey Comics, and that he came out of a 12-year retirement at age 89 to write for this issue. Now that's heavy.
That is
really, that's right. Only the Lord can do that.
It really, because when I first spoke to him, he really, you know, he's 89 years old, you know, he's an old guy, and he was really feeling like, and it was so funny, it was a great story. He told me, he said, well, if you just contacted me, what did he say? If you just contacted me 10 years ago, he says, I think I would have been up to it. And my first thought when I hung up the phone was, yeah, boy, 10 years ago when he was in his prime, and I thought, he was 79 years old, you know?
In his prime, right?
But another fellow that was a college professor down in Florida, who also, Irv Zeman, who's on that list, called me up and said, let me talk to him one more time. And I said, I really wish you would. I said, because I don't want to twist his arm. I said, but I really feel like the Lord wants him involved in this book. And at the time, I thought it was primarily for the message that he might have to convey. And I think it is, in large part. He's a very strong, committed Christian. But his name, surprisingly to me, above all others of people who contributed to the book, his name has opened more doors for us into the secular comic book community. The Comic Buyer's Guide, which is a publication for the industry, the people that published that went nuts that Gaylord Du Bois, and his name, I always thought it was pronounced Du Bois, it's spelled like, but he pronounces it Du Bois. He says it rhymes with voice. So, but anyway, when they found out that Gaylord Du Bois was working on this comic book, they were thrilled.
Well, I see another name on here that's familiar to me, and that's Vic Emmert.
Yeah.
Vic Emmert was involved in one of the local radio stations here in town.
Right.
One of the Christian radio stations, K-Light. He's no longer here in Albuquerque, of course, but wonderful man.
Yeah.
Vic and his wife, beautiful family.
Now, where do you get stories for? Does Susan help you, give you ideas for stories to go in these? Are they biblical stories?
Well, I always, whenever, you know, trying to take credit for things, like, in the secular world, you would say, I created all the features in it. I feel like the Lord gave me most of the stories, that they, you know, that they came, you know, to me during times of prayer. But a friend of mine told me, he says, well, he says, the problem is, he says, if you tell people the Lord created these stories and somebody says, I think they stink, you know, then it's like, you know, then you know, maybe you're casting the Lord in a bad light. So I feel like the stories came from the Lord. You know, if there is fault to be found with them, it's because God had to deal with a human being to get him.
So they're not biblical stories then from the Bible?
No.
You haven't taken off on a story from the Word?
No, we may do that, you know, if God willing there's future issues, we may do things like that. But it's primarily, one of the things we wanted to do was, you know, so much of TV and movies now, if you see anybody that's a spiritual person or a religious person or you know, a member of the clergy in TV and movies now, they're always, you know, they're money-grubbing evangelists, or they're evil people, you know, who they don't believe in the Lord at all, and they're just taking advantage of people, or they're weak and wimpy and ineffectual Christians that, you know, they have no power in their life. You know, I don't want to mention necessarily specific shows, but they'll sit around and play cards with the rest of the people, and they don't act any different. And when the world comes to us and we say, well, you know, we're Christians and Christ is in our lives, and that makes a difference, sometimes I think the only thing in their minds is these images they've seen on the silver screen, and they're like, it doesn't look any different to me. So, but I thought, well, the only way we're going to have positive Christian characters, cool or hip Christian characters, if you will, is we're going to have to do it ourselves. So that's one of the things we wanted to do, and particularly the lead story, Eterniteens. We wanted to have a group of kids, and they're in the Eterniteens story, they're baby Christians. They're sort of learning about their faith, and they have a pastor that you know, is really right on, and he knows what the scoop is. But to create, you know, characters that kids could look at and say, yeah, this is neat, this is cool, I think these characters are cool, and they have values, and they have morals, and they're living their life by the word. And it's not, and they're not stupid for it, you know, or portrayed as stupid, and they're not dishonest, and they're not, you know, all the things that the world tries to make us out to be.
Now, where are you marketing this?
Well, in fulfillment of the Lord's vision, we have pre-sold 3,000 of the books into the secular comic book market. They'll be in secular comic book stores across the country. And one of the drawbacks sometimes when you do something new in the church is sometimes the church is a little bit wary about where you're coming from and who you are, and I don't blame them. I'm kind of the same way. You know, when a new book comes out, and a lot of, you know, in the Christian community, you kind of want to know a little bit about who's done it, and are they a heretic, and is what they've said biblically sound, and so you don't want to rush right out and embrace it immediately. And that's kind of how the Christian community has been a little bit, because you look at the cover of the book, and it's obvious, like a friend of mine said, it's obviously not a tame book, and it's not meant to be. You know,
No.
I mean, it's not meant to be. You know, it's not ultra violent, and it's certainly no sexual type and no occult type of things. At least there is one reference to the occult in one story, but it's, you know, the occult, the people who worship Satan and follow Satan are portrayed as evil, horrible people who have no loyalties whatsoever, you know, no sympathetic portrayals of the occult. But so I'm kind of on the basis of, at this point, I'm selling the book into Christian bookstores kind of almost virtually on a store-by-store basis across this country. And like Susan was telling me, she said, when people just hear about it, see flyers, hear promotion third hand, they're kind of cool. She said, you know, cool to it, cold to it. She said, but when you get to talk to people one-on-one, tell them your heart, tell them where you're coming from, she said, people catch fire about it.
And they see the magazine.
Well,
yeah, so I think I need to do more of like what I'm doing now, is to have a chance to present it on Christian TV and radio and just tell people.
And have you
about
had an opportunity to go to the Christian bookstores here in this community?
I haven't yet. I figured I would wait until I had books to take around, and that's probably, I'll be doing probably a lot of mailing of the books and try to present.
Well, you know, it's real interesting that you should be on the show today, because in light of what's happening with comedians, and I don't know if you've seen some of the controversy on television and the newscast about the kinds of comedians we're having now, I have thought, why not a Christian comedian?
Oh, sure. There are some. There are some, but they're not very well known.
Do we know of them?
No, they're not very well known.
Do we see them on television?
And we don't see too much of them. No, we really don't.
And of course, I've been wondering about, not that I could qualify.
Well, Warnke, you know, Warnke is probably the best known.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, he is a comedian.
And he does the kind of work that really changes lives. I mean, for Christ. But there
needs to be more.
But there aren't that many. There aren't that many out there, and so this and that kind of comedy needs to be there, because I believe that God has a sense of humor. I believe that God, I mean, He created me. He's got to have a sense of humor, you know. So I believe that He enjoys laughing, and that's what our lives are all about. That we have to laugh. Laughter is wholesome in of itself. Children need to understand that there are some other ways that they can get satisfaction and be a part of the in crowd, so to speak. That's an old term, but the phrase, I think, still has merit, in that they can still have these and still be a cool dude. And that's important for these young children today, to be in with their friends and their peer group. This kind of publication has merit in my heart. And I think that it's something that you need to continue with a great deal of zeal in favor, because God is going to favor this, because you favored Him.
It was like you were saying before about remembering to praise the Lord at all times. When I got into this, I had a certain amount of money that the Lord had impressed upon me to set aside from my income to produce to start the production, to hire the artists and writers and whatnot. But I didn't have the money to do the color separations and printing, which is the biggest chunk of money you need. But I just felt like the Lord was telling me, you know, the money is going to be there, and so we just proceeded full speed ahead on this thing. And you know, it was a real faith-building experience for me, because to go ahead with a project when there was no money to make commitments to printers and color separators, when there was no money, just knowing that the money was going to show up eventually. And I told Susan, I said, no, I just normally wouldn't do that. As a business person, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't make those kind of commitments. But one day, I went into the studio, and before I started work, I was praising that. I was just like, thank you, Lord. I just know that the money's coming in. I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not going to fret. You know, I have a tendency to be a little bit of a worrier at times, particularly when it comes to money and stuff. And I praised him and thanked him. And right after I got done with that, a fellow called up and volunteered to donate some money to help with the project. And I told him, I said, it was so nice for one time in my life, you know, because of course after that, then I really was praising even more. But I said, how nice for once in my life to have, you know, not to go to the Lord and feel guilty, like, yes, Lord, now I'm thanking you that I've seen the provision. How nice for once to have said, I was praising him before even, you know, so you don't have to feel guilty when you praise after. It's like you just keep on praising. And it's so important to go on praising even when it just looks like it's not going to happen. And God granted me favor with that printer. When I first went to the printer, they had just been burned very badly by some comic book publishers, and Christian businessmen don't always have the best reputation sometimes with secular businesses. And she was like, you give me 50% up front, and then you give me 50% before we're even done. And I prayed, I said, Lord, give me favor with her, because I won't be able to do that. And we're holding the books here now, and I still haven't paid her all the money. And I mean, we've got the provision now to finish paying the job off, but she was and that's been neat too, because it's been a witnessing opportunity to her too, to talk to her about how how God is working on this comic.
Now, Susan, you're in Christian education now. Do you have any opportunities to use some of Nate's work as it relates to your work in the church?
Well, I'm hoping that the teenagers in our church will have an opportunity to see the comic book and to read it, and you know, there are youth groups that we have exposure to in the church and in the area. I'm hoping that we can start spreading it out, and maybe they can get it to their friends, and that would be a way of spreading this.
Well, I see this as an opportunity through the churches, even, you know, through your ministry, beginning at your particular church and then spreading it to other churches, to have it available. You know, I'm wondering if youth ministers in churches in the city know that this is available. The magazine is available. I'm sure that's probably a market there. I don't know how you feel about marketing to other churches.
No, that's, you know, one of the lead story, again, Eternities, has been written to be a story, hopefully, that will make Christianity, well, there's Christian comic books out there already, and some of them, you know, you kind of get to the last page and it says, are you ready to give your life to Christ? Yes, no, you know, pray this prayer. I think that can happen. I'm not always sure it does happen. The way that Eternities was written was so that a Christian youth, somebody who's already saved, could take this book. You know, you could get it in your youth group. You and your pastor could talk about it, because it deals with witnessing, and you could take this book then as a teenager to an unsaved friend and say, here's a comic book that I want you to read, and the unsaved friend reads it, and hopefully there's enough questions raised in this book that this person then comes back and says, what's this all about? You know, I don't understand. And then one-on-one, I think, like Christ wants us to do, one-on-one, you as a saved person can then turn around and explain the gospel message, explain where you're coming from as a Christian. So I really do see it as a tremendous youth group tool within a youth group for discussion, for generating discussion, but also then that the youth group can take out copies and distribute to unsaved friends.
You know, one of the areas that I think of that perhaps you should be praying about is, of course, speaking with some of the denominational administrative offices in their educational areas to at least make them aware that this kind of tool is available, that they might not necessarily have it available for Sunday school, but certainly have it available for their churches, for their educational staff, so that they can disseminate this information throughout the denominational work in the United States. I'm grateful that you all have chosen to come and spend this time with us. It's been a blessing to me, because there's been this void. There really has been this void, and we need someone to fill this gap. And I praise God that you all have sensed that vision from the Lord, you seized it, and then you've run with it. And God is obviously honoring that, and He's blessing it in a mighty way. I thank you both for being with us today. Susan,